Billy here at Gilbert Travels. Join me today on one of the most exciting flights still out there remaining with Alaska Airlines on their milk run on up to Juneau today with 3 stops in between. So excited to take you on this legendary flight today on a 737-700 up in first class. So been enjoying a few minutes here in the first class lounge before heading down to the gate. Morning starts in a few minutes.
I started out the day back in Alaska's flagship North Terminal Lounge for breakfast, where I was glad for the complimentary barista-made coffee. That's a nice touch for a domestic lounge for sure. Self-serve food items were available from a buffet, but disposable servingware was still in use. In addition to Alaska's famous pancake machine, there was a selection of breads available to be toasted. So I sat down to a quick breakfast in this memorable lounge before heading down to scope out my plane for today's 6-hour journey. The 737-700 is the smallest Boeing remaining in Alaska's fleet, going head-to-head with the Airbus A319 for passenger capacity. Check out all of the destinations listed out on the boarding message here, showing off the total of 5 locations this same aircraft will arrive at today.
And here we go. Hello.
We arrive on board to a 12-seat first-class cabin with 3 rows in the typical 2x2 configuration. I'll be in seat 3F for this trip on the right side of the aircraft, which has the best views for northern departures on the milk run. This is a different seat than I've experienced on Alaska's 737-800 and 900 series, with a hardback literature area, personal item pocket, and deploying footrest for shorter passengers. In the center armrest, you'll find power ports, built-in cup holders, and a small item pouch, good for a cell phone. The outer armrest contains the tray table.
En route flight time for takeoff to touchdown on our way to Ketchiakan will be 1 hour and 37 minutes and 38,000 feet. Should be a smooth ride and a great day to fly. Last part of weather in Ketchiakan just shows some overcast clouds, temperatures on the right in the 50s. Hopefully some of that will clear up, and along the route northbound from there to Wrangell and Petersburg and Juneau. Should be a nice day. Once again, welcome aboard. Thank you for joining us here at Alaska Airlines for your 1 hour and 37 minute flight to Ketchiakan.
Considering that the many stops are one of the main features of this unique flight, I'm going to leave the 8 takeoffs and landings intact so you can enjoy them on this review. Northern takeoffs from Seattle have not been common for me, so I was happy to have a nice pass over nearby Boeing Field as we climbed out, as well as a glimpse at downtown before turning out to the west over Puget Sound towards the Olympic Peninsula, containing one of 3 national parks in Washington state. We also spotted the peak of Mount Baker to the north, the 3rd highest mountain in Washington, at 10,781 feet, 3,286 meters. Alright, we're up at a cruising altitude. Put in the meal order. Now cruising over Vancouver, BC, past the San Juan Islands. heading up the inside passage towards Alaska. Service today started promptly with some hot coffee, still being served in paper cups at the time of filming. I deployed the tablet holder built into the tray table to use my iPad as a tracker map with Alaska's streaming entertainment, and I kept watching the world roll by. Off we go to Alaska, over past Western Canada here. Wasn't able to pre-order any food on the flight, but they did come around. Choice of a protein platter, fruit cheese plate, or a breakfast sandwich. Decided to have a little spot of food. My understanding is there's no service on any of the hopper flights after this first flight up to Ketchiakan. Very comfortable here. Excited to finally be doing this legendary flight. Hope you're enjoying coming along. So this first leg up to Ketchiakan is about an hour and a half. Shaping up to be a beautiful day. We're supposed to get some rain as we get up to Juneau, but hopefully that holds off long enough to get some beautiful views once we get up between these Alaskan stops. Thank you. So Alaska has been bringing back more and more meal service here this summer, and now on flights over, I think it's 640 miles. They're serving plated meals, cold meals, and then hot meals start at 1,100 miles. These look like basically the previously pre-packaged meals. Now they're just presenting them on real plates with real silverware. So this morning I went with the breakfast sandwich. Looks pretty decent here. Comes with some fresh fruit and some kind of a sauce. Let's check it out. I must say I had low expectations for the meal service on this flight, but I found the sandwich served fresh and flavorful, as well as the fruit served along with it was a nice touch. I do hope that a more full meal service resumes on even more flights with Alaska, but I couldn't complain about what I got today. As I ate, the views just kept getting better and better, even looking out the old, small, and weathered windows of this almost 20-year-old 737. So take a look at that down there. All that white in those mountains is not clouds. And there's probably some snow in there, but it's not all snow. That is ice. Those are glaciers. You can see here in the foreground, kind of in the center there, is a small one coming down to face the mountain. This is really rugged wilderness out here. Now you see that white in between the mountains? Those are clouds. I got myself a cocktail to nurse, which would be the last service, besides water bottles, for the remainder of this trip. We're about 18 minutes to landing here. We've crossed over the Alaskan border, back in the USA, and we're on descent down into Ketchiakan. The first of 3 stops on our way this morning up to Juneau. Starting to come over some pretty thick cloud cover here, but there are some breaks in it. So we'll just have to pick our luck here today and hope that we don't get too bothered here by these clouds. But a beautiful cruise up here on this first hour and a half on our way from Seattle to Ketchiakan. Alaska is just unreasonably beautiful. This is something else to see. And we are just barely in the southern panhandle of Alaska. Already, it's a whole different world. A true last frontier of the American West. Hope you're enjoying these amazing views as we come into Ketchiakan.
okay? If you do deplane, you will have to go back through and get re-cleared for security. We're at Ketchiakan, y'all. Sorry, I read the wrong announcement. So thank you. We're at Ketchiakan.
All right, made it to Ketchiakan. We're on the 737-700, the smallest Boeing in Alaska's fleet. It was also the first of the next generation aircraft announced by Boeing, and started flying for Southwest, I believe it was in 1997. For this particular route, Alaska used to fly the 737-400 Combi. That's a half freight, half passenger aircraft. And now they've switched it to this all passenger 700 since that other aircraft was retired. So it's a comfortable plane for the trip here. Splurged on first to get lounge access there in Seattle on the way up. To have a little bigger seat for the 6-hour journey with all these stops, and to get that little breakfast there, since I'm on the plane till after lunch, and as I understand, there's no further service after this first flight. But we definitely seem to be in for some more beautiful scenery. So I'll tell you a little bit more about this flight once we get up to our next stop in Wrangell.
It must be said that not only is this trip a real gem for app geeks, it's also an essential link for these isolated and small communities, and you'll see evidence of that in the unconventional luggage found streaming on and off the planes at each stop. Alaska also operates 3 dedicated 737-700 cargo converted aircraft, which are critical to get supplies into and products out of these places. This example was coming in from Sitka, Alaska, and exchanged cargo while we were waiting for our next leg to begin. My last note on the 737-700 is that it still features a single upright winglet rather than the split scimitar winglet found on Alaska's larger 737s. I, for one, prefer the cleaner look of the single winglet. What do you think?
Welcome aboard Alaska Airlines Flight 65, service to Wrangell, Petersburg, Juneau, and Anchorage. Thank you for being mindful of others while finding your seat.
In route flight time on our way to Wrangell is 28 minutes and 20,000 feet. Should be a great flight. Just some high overcast layer clouds. Temperatures are in the mid-50s. Nice day to fly. Thank you for joining us here at Alaska Airlines. Welcome on board.
I found the construction of the runway at Ketchiakan fascinating. Built up on a raised berm 30 feet above the level of the terminal, so high that it's not even visible from below when inside the aircraft. You can watch the gap shrink as you gradually climb up the hill to runway level. Even still, this 7,500 foot, 2,286 meter runway is almost 4 feet higher at the southern end, runway 29, with 89.2 feet of elevation, where we're about to take off. The taxiway here runs short of the actual end of the runway, requiring the plane to turn left, proceed down to the actual end, then turn around to give the pilot almost every bit of usable runway, providing a little padding on the approximately 6,000 foot, 1,800 meter rated takeoff distance on the 737-700. Now enjoy the condensed flight today down to Wrangell, Alaska. Make sure to note how little time we spent at our top altitude, shifting from climbing to descent in one fluid arc. Cloud cover impaired all of the views for the middle portion of the flight. However, the scenery returned quickly once we descended back through the curtains of white. Wrangell is a subsidized stop under the US's Essential Air Service, and Alaska is the sole scheduled commercial carrier serving the estimated population of 2,500 people with 2 daily flights, which are the north and southbound milk runs. The city of Wrangell has a 14-mile paved highway, so it is otherwise only connected with the outside world via ferries on the Alaska Marine Highway.
Local time is approximately 10:08. Please keep your seatbelt securely fastened. The pilots will turn off the seatbelt time when it's safe to get out. If you're continuing on with us, we encourage you to remain on board. Landing in Wrangell will require you to re-clear security screening. Unfortunately, this terminal does not offer any amenities. We'll be using stairs to exit the aircraft. Watch your step and head directly into the terminal. Smoking is not allowed in the ramp area.
Made it here to Wrangell. Our second of 3 stops here on this direct flight today. And yes, I do call it a direct flight, even though it's not a non-stop flight. Those terms often get used interchangeably, but direct simply means that you're getting to your destination on the same airplane, on the same flight number, which in this case today, all of these flights are Alaska 65, and since it is a direct flight, I am able to stay here on the aircraft, and I'm checked through all in one ticket. Oh, I was able to stick my head outside the plane here real quick at this remote ramp stop. Breathe some fresh Alaska air for a minute, stretch my legs. It is interesting here. Between the stops, they take a count of everybody who stayed on board the plane to make sure everybody's on that's supposed to be and see who they need to check back in that went through the terminal and might be coming back on. Again, here in Wrangell, there's really nothing at all to do, so there's no real reason to get off the plane. Wrangell saw more passengers and cargo loaded, including quite a bit of fresh seafood, which unsurprisingly is the primary industry of the local community.
Ladies and gentlemen, for the flight deck, good afternoon or good morning, and welcome aboard the continuation of Flight 65, service to Petersburg, continuing on to Juneau. In round flight time, takeoff to touchdown, just about 15 minutes, maybe a little bit less than that. Should be a beautiful day to fly. We'll stay nice and low and have a nice view of the Wrangell Narrows to Petersburg. That's for weather there. Both Petersburg and Juneau shows just a little bit of rain. Nothing too bad. And some calm winds.
So this is the third and by far shortest leg of this trip. Only 31 miles as the crow flies. So as you heard the captain say, only about 15 minutes in the air. And we never do make it to a cruising altitude on this flight. Should be nice and low the whole way in this very short trip. Wrangell has an even shorter runway, 5,999 feet, 1,828 meters, which is dead on the takeoff length we discussed earlier. It has no parallel taxiway, so we had to taxi down the length of the runway to the eastern side and then turn around to take off on runway 28. Now enjoy, sped up for the sake of time, the entire 9-minute in the air flight to Petersburg. On this hop, we reached a maximum altitude of 3,225 feet and 270 knots of speed. This is definitely not your average flight in an airliner. Petersburg is on Mitkoff Island, and we ran parallel to a good portion of the 32-mile Mitkoff Highway. To give you an idea how low we are, the highest point on the island, Crystal Mountain, is actually higher than our altitude, reaching 3,317 feet. We then turned in to land, passing over a local muskeg, a type of peat bog common in Alaska and Western Canada.
Alright, we made it to Petersburg. Last stop of my journey today for the last leg up to Juneau. That flight of just 31 miles in a straight line, only 10 minutes in the air, was quite thrilling, never getting up to a high altitude. Really beautiful little hop there. One of the more unique flights still available in commercial aviation to take a big flight, big plane like this 737, such a short little distance. And really through the whole trip, I've been struck by this juxtaposition between this rugged Alaskan wilderness and this modern airplane being used to connect these little communities, and how far aviation has come, and yet how a little flight like this can be a realistic option here in these modern days. Airlines flying planes between multiple cities used to be a pretty common endeavor, and I wanted to give you some kind of an idea, close representation. The numbers aren't exactly the same for distance, but close idea of what something like this trip would look like over more of a continental U.S. And this trip would be roughly equivalent to if Delta ran a flight from Atlanta up to Washington's Reagan National, over to Philadelphia, onward to New York's LaGuardia, and then on to Boston, Massachusetts. I hope that gives you an idea of what this flight covers and what a rough equivalent would be if commercial airliners were still running direct but non-stop flights like this one around the country.
After the doors closed, when we were prepared to take off, we were told by air traffic control to turn back to await incoming traffic. I'm not entirely sure why they did this, given this ground stop ended up being longer than our entire flight to Juneau would have taken. But it gives me a little more time to tell you about this stop on the journey, which is situated almost exactly halfway between Ketchiakan and Juneau. While the island has been inhabited for thousands of years, Western settlements started in the 1800s, and the town was officially incorporated in 1910 by primarily Scandinavian immigrants, giving it the title of Little Norway almost 50 years before Alaska gained U.S. statehood. Today it has an estimated 3,200 residents, and unsurprisingly fishing is its primary industry. But the salmon here is so sought after that local fishermen can haul in over $1 million in annual catch per boat. The community also prides itself as a high-quality small cruise ship destination, quieter than the big stops like Juneau. Finally, our long-awaited inbound traffic, a twin-prop Aero Commander, arrived. And after a seaplane was cleared for takeoff ahead of us, we began yet another taxi down the runway to turn around and take off on runway 5. This airport is also part of the Essential Air Service, served by only these daily Alaska flights, and this runway is a practically generous 6,400 feet, 401 feet longer than Wrangell. Unfortunately, the weather had really moved in by the time we departed for Alaska's capital city of Juneau, so I missed out on any meaningful views during our last cruise. Given Juneau averages only 86 sunny days per year, well less than half of the US average of 205, this is not an uncommon occurrence. The sunniest month in Juneau is June, and the wettest month is September, when it averages over 10 inches of rain, which starts just a few days after my flight in late August. Let's touch quickly on today's booking. One of the great things about the milk run is that it runs daily both north and south from Anchorage, as well as there's a second milk run route, which makes it stops between Juneau and Anchorage. If you have the time, it's possible to overnight in Juneau and take both trips back to back. It's also not terribly expensive, at least when originating in Seattle. Even my first class ticket today was only $333, and main cabin economy tickets, which include your choice of seat selection, can be found readily for under $200 at the time of this filming. And right on cue, we come in for a landing in Juneau in the rain. We ended up only 12 minutes late of our scheduled arrival, despite our lengthy delay in Petersburg. This plane will continue on to Anchorage. However, to preserve seating for local communities, Alaska does not allow the entire journey to be purchased on one ticket out of Seattle, so this is the end destination for me today. Do stay to the end for my closing thoughts.
Our ground time is going to be very limited. The plane departs at 2 o'clock. So if you could just remain seated, we'll let our Juneau passengers and those connecting to Seattle deplane. We are going to have a crew change, so we do ask that you do please stay out of the aisleways. And if you are continuing on to Anchorage, just stay seated. The CSA will come on board and account for you. And thanks again.
And we made it to Juneau.
So the Southern Alaska Milk Run here today as far as Juneau from Seattle. What do I think of that? Would I recommend it? I think it's a very unique piece of aviation, and I definitely recommend anybody who's a fan of aviation to give it a shot. My favorite part of it there was definitely the hop from Wrangell over to Petersburg, only 10 minutes in the air, but beautiful to be in a big 737 like that at a low altitude. Weaving through the mountains. That was a lot of fun. First class. Booked this one, as you saw, with first class. Do I think it was worth the extra for first class? Probably around the halfway mark, I would have said no. It's more of a novelty, especially since you don't get any service in first class after the first leg up. But you know, by the time we got done with that 2-hour ground stop at Petersburg, I was pretty happy to have some extra space to stretch out, and my back really would have been hurting in economy. So depending on the pricing, I do think it's worth considering doing an upgrade to first class. But if the way you can do the flight is in economy, I think that'll be just fine for you. And hopefully you won't have a delayed ground stop like I did. But overall, glad to bring you along on that one. Billy here with Gilbert Travels. I'll see you on the next flight. Please remember to like, comment, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can be made aware first when more content is available. As always, thanks for watching.